Welcome to the Family Holiday Destinations podcast, where we explore the destinations, trends, and ideas shaping modern family travel. I'm Jessica Palmer, mother of two and founder of Family Holiday Destinations, and today we're chatting about Singapore and why ease might actually be its biggest superpower when it comes to family travel. Now, I know Singapore gets overlooked by Aussie families chasing places like Japan, Bali, or Thailand, but honestly, Singapore does something incredibly well that a lot of destinations struggle with. It makes family travel really easy. It's compact, modern, incredibly clean, surprisingly green, easy to navigate, packed with things to do, and the food scene is family friendly. And when you're traveling with kids, that kind of simplicity can completely change the experience. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Kimberly Spykerman from Singapore Tourism about why Singapore works so well for families, how it compares to other Asian destinations, what's new, where locals actually take their kids, and how to build a first-time itinerary. But first, let's jump into a few family travel stories making the news this month. One of the biggest trends we're seeing in family travel right now is families wanting meaningful experiences, but without the stress of organising every little detail themselves. And Intrepid Travel has clearly noticed that too. This month, Intrepid announced a brand new premium family range featuring small group family tours across destinations including Costa Rica, Sri Lanka, India, Vietnam, Morocco, Thailand, and Egypt. Now, what's interesting here isn't just the destinations, it's the positioning. Their own survey found that 70% of parents now place greater value on holidays where the planning, logistics, and stress are handled for them. And honestly, I think a lot of parents listening will relate to that, myself included. We've just returned from our first ever Intrepid trip, and I can honestly say that having Intrepid look after the details of the trip was such a game changer. More about that in another episode though. The new tours focus on immersive cultural experiences with upgraded accommodation and experienced local leaders. Things like staying in a Sahara desert camp in Morocco, coral planting workshops in Borneo, and wildlife safaris in India. What I find really interesting is how this reflects a broader shift in family travel. Families still want adventure and cultural connection, but they increasingly want it packaged in a way that's really manageable. And that actually ties in really nice with today's Singapore conversation. Another interesting trend we've covered recently is that travel is becoming increasingly an emotional priority for Australians, even as the cost of living continues to rise. Research shows people are valuing connection, experiences, and memory making more than ever, especially families. And I think after the past few years, many parents are looking at travel differently. It's less about ticking boxes and more about quality time together. That doesn't necessarily mean luxury in the traditional sense either. Sometimes luxury is simply feeling less rushed, less overwhelmed, and more present while traveling with your kids. Again, something Singapore actually does incredibly well. I'll leave a link to our article on this research in the show notes, as well as the other news pieces we talk about today. And finally, one story I absolutely loved recently was Tokyo's new family-friendly sumo dining experience launched through Mamaru Hotels in Japan. What stood out to me wasn't just the sumo itself. It was the idea of making Japanese culture more accessible for families. Because sometimes cultural experiences overseas can feel intimidating with kids. Parents worry that the kids will get bored, not understand it, or struggle with language barriers. But we're seeing more destinations and tourism operators designing experiences specifically to help families engage with local culture and in fun and approachable ways. And honestly, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities in family travel moving forward. Also, it just looks like a lot of fun. I've added it to our bucket list. So, with all that in mind, let's jump into today's main conversation. I'm joined by Kim Spykerman from Singapore Tourism to chat about why Singapore continues to stand out as one of the easiest and honestly most underrated destinations in Asia for families. We talk about how Singapore's compact size completely changes the family travel experience, why it can be an ideal first or next step into Asia, where locals actually take their own kids beyond the headline attractions, and how Singapore blends big city energy with nature, food, and outdoor spaces surprisingly well. Here's my chat with Kim.
Hello, Jessica. Lovely to meet you.
So now I personally think that how easy Singapore is Singapore's superpower when it comes to family travel. It's modern, it's surprisingly green, it's compact, it has excellent public transport. There's plenty of things to do and the food is amazing. So for families who haven't yet considered Singapore, what does ease actually look like in practice?
Well, I think you actually hit the nail on the head with everything that you've just shared. But I feel like what it really comes down to when we're talking about ease for Australian families is really removing like the small frictions. And I feel like that starts from the moment you land in Singapore at the Singapore Changi Airport, because it's not really just an entry point. For us, we've designed it to be a holiday that, in and of itself, when you land with Jewel having that whole bunch of options from like
Yes.
dining, shopping, I'm sure you know about all the other attractions
Yep.
there. Like
The
the
airport's
vortex.
amazing.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, and that's an experience in and of itself, connecting to all the different terminals. So you're removing all that friction, even at the arrivals, transit, departure, and making it very enjoyable for both the parents and the children. Once you get into the city, Singapore is really compact, it's highly connected, and it's really simple to navigate. And I think primarily that's because of our public transport system. And you, having been to Singapore, would probably know that everyone gets around on the MRT,
Yes.
the subway,
Yeah.
essentially, or the mass rapid transit, or even our
Yes.
buses. And it's very easy to move between all the different like neighborhoods, the cultural precincts, our hawker centers, gardens, all the main spots.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not spending a lot of time just getting around. And that makes a really, really big difference when you're traveling with young children, for example. And then I think for me, the other part about ease, aside from the getting around part, is really choice, the amount of choice that you have without feeling too overwhelmed. So you could have like a big day out at Sentosa or at the Mandai Wildlife Reserve looking at animals. And at the same time, the next day, you could just have a slower one walking through our cultural precincts, going to the various parks and outdoor spaces, having hawker center experiences. The experiences are all very close together, but yet they feel very different. And so you can really like build the holiday around the pace that you want to have, rather than having to race from like one destination to another, so to speak. And so when we talk about Singapore being an easy destination, we don't mean that it's simple or it's one-dimensional. I think what we mean is that, we really think about it, like how to make the experience. We design the experience in a very thoughtful way, and we allow visitors, especially families, to do culture, nature, food, play, and all these world-class experiences with less stress in between.
Absolutely. So I was going to ask you about how Singapore's compact size changes the experience for time-poor families, but we probably just talked about that. When you compare it to a place like Japan, they're both amazing, but Japan can be quite difficult in that you need to spend a couple hours on a train to get to the next town. And Singapore is just amazing because, it's 5-10 minutes on the MRT, and then you can go back to the hotel for the afternoon and go do something else that afternoon, and it's only 5-10 minutes away. And I think that compactness is one of the things that makes it incredible for families.
Actually,
Yeah.
100% right. I think I
Yeah.
would probably say that with families, and because I have a young child, I would say that if you're traveling to, like, say, Asia for the first
Yes.
time, or maybe it's your first international trip as a family, Singapore's compactness can actually give you a lot of confidence, because we all know that young children, in terms of their moods, pretty unpredictable.
Yes.
Yeah, so they could get really
Absolutely.
tired, or suddenly need a
Yep.
nap, or
Yep.
they need to run and get their energy out. And if
Yes.
your plans need to change,
Yes.
then I would say that you're never really far from the next good option. And there's always like transport nearby, there's always somewhere to eat, and there's always like a family friendly experience close by. So I feel like,
Absolutely.
yeah, like getting into Asia, if it's your first trip to Asia, and from that perspective, like culturally, I feel like there's a lot of diversity there for like families with the older kids. Because we have like the mix of Chinese, Indian, Malay, Eurasian cultures that they all
Yes.
converge in Singapore, and you can easily access all of these in our different precincts. I feel like if you have older children, that's also a great introduction to Asia.
It is.
So I feel
Absolutely.
like, yeah, I feel like that kind of makes a big difference for families, especially if you're a family with older kids and you want your kids to be immersed and learning about different cultures. That's an easy way to get into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're seeing strong demand for Japan. How does Singapore compare as a first or a next step into Asia?
I would probably say that, firstly, I would say that Japan is definitely having a moment with the Australian travelers, including the
It is.
families, and 100% can see why. I think Singapore offers a very different but very complementary way into Asia. I think earlier we talked about, for families, it's a very gentle, confidence building introduction into Asia, because it has the excitement, the food, the culture, and energy of Asia, but there's also a level of simplicity that's very reassuring for parents. English is widely spoken. Public
Yes.
transport, again, as I mentioned, easy to navigate, distances
Yeah.
are short.
And it's
Compared with,
efficient too, incredibly efficient. Well, it was when I was there
yes,
anyway.
yes, and that hasn't changed. So I'm very
Yeah.
glad that you had such a good experience when you
Yeah.
were there. I would say that if I were to make a comparison with Japan, you're right in saying earlier that Japan there's a lot of distances to traverse. And you might have to move between cities, get on different modes of transport, things like that, to access all the variety of offerings that Japan has. In Singapore, I would say you access a big variety of experiences from one base, and you can often do
Yes.
that within the same day. And again, that comes back to, if you have younger children, limited time, or maybe even a multi-generational trip where you have people of different abilities and energy levels, that
Yes.
can help
Absolutely.
a lot. And Singapore can really cater to that. The other thing I would say is that actually Singapore and Japan, they're actually great to pair together. So you could do you're from Australia, you go into Singapore,
Absolutely. Yes.
you do a little trip, either before your big trip in Japan, or even the other way around, where you're coming back from your big trip in Japan and you want a couple of easy days to rest and reset before you come back to Australia and get back into the swing of things. You can reset in Singapore for a couple of days and come back feeling super refreshed. So you can twin them together and you have two completely different experiences. Yeah.
Certainly. So, what are some of the newer attractions and developments families should have on their radar in Singapore?
Well, I'm very passionate about this. Having also just come back from a recent trip to Singapore and visited some of this myself, I feel like I have a lot of opinions. I would say that one of the things about Singapore, which I personally love, is that you always have something new to come back to. So even if you are a repeat visitor, you're always going to find something new. And a great example of this, and something that I really enjoyed myself on a recent trip, would be Exploria at the Mandai Wildlife Reserve. So Mandai Wildlife Reserve houses all the various wildlife parks, and these are all outdoor experiences. This one, Exploria, is a super engaging indoor nature-themed multimedia experience. It is huge, roughly the size of 8 Olympic-sized swimming pools, placed side
Wow.
by side. Yeah, so it's a
Yeah.
huge arena for
Yeah.
families to explore, and there are different worlds that families can go into. And what is lovely about it is that it makes big ideas about nature feel really, really accessible for children. So you can
Okay.
walk into a different room and be surrounded by towering dinosaurs. You can experience a monsoon storm. You can look at little microbial worlds and just really have all these interactive elements throughout so that children are not just looking at displays, you're really engaging with these exhibits, learning how ecosystems work and basically how their choices also affect life on this planet. So this is a really cool indoor experience that I personally really enjoyed when we visited. Another one which I think I would definitely not miss is the Oceanarium, the Singapore Oceanarium. So this one is an upgrade of the former Sea Aquarium, and the new facility is about 3 times the size of its predecessor. It's got 22 immersive zones, it's got live habitats, great storytelling, and of course a strong focus on education, research, and conservation. So I feel like very importantly, you're not just entertained, but you come away with a greater understanding again of how your actions impact the world around you. And I feel like that's very important for families, I guess, with again the older kids.
It is. And, if you can sneak learning in while you're on holiday and without knowing it, that's always amazing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I do feel like that's also really important because like at the end of the day, we all want to also have that kind of like values-based kind of experiences for our kids where they get to experience, whether it's culture, and we all know that in Singapore you can get a lot of that, like immerse yourself in different cultures and learn about other cultures through like food or art, heritage, things like that. But also just the fact that in some of our attractions, the conservation message is very strong. And I think like that's something that's a very beautiful thing. Yeah.
Beyond Sentosa and the zoo, where do locals, like Singaporean locals, take their own children? What do they do on the weekend that we don't know about? What's a hidden gem that the locals know of?
Ooh, okay. This is a good one. Okay, 100% not a hidden gem, but I would say that Australian families are always on the right track when they head to a hawker center, because hawker centers are like the lifeblood of Singaporean community. Like that's where people gather. You can really get a sense of local culture. So on any given weekday or weekend, you are bound to find Singaporean families at a hawker center. So 100% that has to make it onto the itinerary when families go to Singapore. The other thing, people might always say that the weather in Singapore is pretty warm. It's either like really warm or perhaps rainy, and so sometimes we don't always think that being outdoors is the natural thing for Singaporean families. But in truth, I think that that's something that we really enjoy. We just find ways around it. So, for example, I think one of the things where you'll find a lot of Singapore families, or one of the places rather that you'll find a lot of Singapore families, is water play areas. So there's a great one, at the Singapore Botanic Gardens, and it's called the Jacob Ballas Children's Garden.
Yes, I have been there. Yes,
have you been there? Yeah.
Yes, it was wonderful, actually. Yeah, I really appreciated that. Was like a dedicated kids zone. It was amazing.
Yeah, exactly that. So lots of locals love spaces like that because you get like nature play, learning spaces, water play. So it's really nice to just have a very unstructured day over there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And then another great outdoor space which lots of families love is our East Coast Park. You can go there for cycling, do some scootering, you can have a picnic, and then there's a lot of casual dining options nearby. Another one would be Marina Barrage. So both East Coast Park and Marina Barrage are great options for outdoor activities, kite flying. Marina Barrage, you get a little bit of the city skyline views as well as that combination of green space and the city as a backdrop. That's always a beautiful thing to be able to see that. And if outdoors is a little too overwhelming for you, we have a lot of great like indoor kids playgrounds, or we even have a children's museum, which is always a fun option, I think, for families. Yeah.
So I noticed personally that Singapore is a very green city, and that really surprised me. How does Singapore balance that city energy with nature and outdoor spaces?
I think for us, we don't treat nature as separate from the city. I think immediately when you leave the airport and you go down the highway into the city, the first thing that you'll notice is that you're surrounded by greenery. And I think that gives you a strong sense of, what matters to us, like having that green space, even though we are very densely built. There are a lot of buildings, but we
Yes.
integrate the green into our living space. So you see it in the shaded walkways, our rooftop gardens, our park connectors, nature reserves, and our beautifully
Absolutely.
designed public spaces. It's everywhere. So even when you're in the middle of a very busy city, you'll always have a sense of greenery around you. And I would say that you don't have to go far if you want something a little bit like wilder. Just a stone's throw away, you'll have a mangrove, wetlands, rainforest trails, coastal parks, urban farms, and even wildlife experiences. So I feel like
Yes.
we have a compact space, but we always make sure that sense of greenery is never far away from our consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really appreciated when you're traveling with a family
Yes,
as well, to know that there's you're going to be able to find a park when you know that they
exactly.
need to just run around a little bit.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Because you definitely want a big, exciting city experiences, but we all know that like
Yes,
kids sometimes they get a bit overwhelmed, and you want to be
they
able to
do.
give them, yeah, you want to give them some calm without having to like travel too far for it. So I feel
Yeah,
like it's wonderful to have that green space already easily accessible, and just built
absolutely.
into that landscape. Yeah.
So food is such a defining part of the destination. How can families experience Singapore's culinary scene?
I love food. So I
So
feel
do
like
I.
yeah.
I understand.
Do you have a favorite, like a favorite type of food when you go to Singapore?
No, I'm not very adventurous with my food. So when I go overseas, I will pick something that feels safe for
Okay,
an
yeah.
Australian. So I tend to avoid anything that's too spicy. But I did
Okay, yeah.
like I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's a chicken, it starts with H, out of Singapore. Is it high?
Hainanese chicken rice?
Yes, that
Yeah,
I
yes.
loved.
Oh, that is so
I
good.
kept eating it. And, and it's quite simple, but the flavor of it was just amazing. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. No,
Yep.
you're spot on. And that's a classic. That's an absolute Singapore classic. Yeah. I think that's one of my comforts as well. I ate it a lot as a kid. I still love it as an adult.
I will say
Yeah.
that I found Singapore easy. One of my children is quite picky, especially when they were
Hmm.
younger, and it was
Hmm.
a big problem, like with eating takeaway. He would rather starve than than eat something that wasn't porridge or yogurt. And I did find Singapore quite easy
Yeah.
to find him food that he would actually eat.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. I think that's actually really important because I think one of the things about Singapore is that we have a great variety of cuisines and at different kind of like price points. So if you're looking for like a Michelin star meal, you probably find it really
Yes.
easily in Singapore. But on the other end, if you're looking for like a really good value, local meal, that's not far from you either. I would probably want to come back to the hawker centers in terms
Yeah.
of experiencing our culinary scene because I
Yep.
feel that that's a very low pressure way to try local food. Um,
Yes.
because of the sheer variety, everyone can choose something different to
Absolutely.
suit
Yes. For families,
exactly. Yes, yes,
that's
because
a
not
great
everyone's gonna.
option.
Yeah, they're not gonna want to eat the same thing. Portions are also easy to share, and you don't actually have to commit to a restaurant experience, which means that
Yes.
from a value for money perspective, that works out very well for a family. Some great options would probably be Lau Pa Sat. Then you have Maxwell Food Center, Makan Sutra Grattan's Bay. So you can get all the favorites like chicken rice, satay,
Yes.
laksa, and some of the other Singapore delicacies. That it's a whole variety. Like you're totally spot for choice rather. And then I would also say that another quintessential thing that you have to experience when you're in Singapore is our traditional Singapore breakfast. So that's the kaya toast and a traditional coffee. Kaya is a jam, a very well loved jam that is sweet and creamy, and it's made from coconut milk, eggs, sugar, and pandan. So it's a very beautiful, mild jam, and you have it on really crispy toast.
Yeah.
And
So a
yeah,
bit of a sweet breakfast.
oh yes, and it's well loved. So I would say that that's a great experience to have. And then the other thing I would say, if you have kids who are adventurous, is to try Peranakan food. So this is like the streets Chinese cuisine, and you can find this
Okay.
in one of our key precincts in Katong Juchiat. It's great for Peranakan flavors. And then if you love spices and sweets, you can do Little India, heritage dining and hawker stalls. You can go to Chinatown, and yeah, Middle Eastern flavors at Kampong Glam. So lots of different ways to experience culture in Singapore, but primarily through food, I would say. It's a great way to get into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So last question, if a family had 7 days, what would an ideal first time itinerary look like?
I feel so thrilled that you're asking for a week-long itinerary, because I feel like that's a perfect amount of time to be able to feel that you have immersed yourself in Singapore, not just as a tourist, but to really get a flavor of what
Yes.
it's like to be in Singapore and to experience Singapore almost like a local. It gives you time to balance out between different experiences.
Yes.
So I would definitely say that 7 days is great for variety, but also gives you a bit of breathing room. So I would start with Marina Bay, of course, and your gardens by the bay, because that gives you that immediate, iconic "we are in Singapore" moment. These are our icons. You have the skyline, the super trees, the light shows, all the easy dining nearby. Then I would build in a cultural precinct neighborhood day early into the trip. So then you choose somewhere like our cultural precincts that I mentioned earlier: Chinatown, Little India, Kampong Glam, Katong Joo Chiat. Let the day just kind of revolve around the food, the color, the heritage. There are lots of great murals that tell the story of the precinct. Great boutiques, independent brands, little shops. It's a great way to have a day out where you're experiencing local culture, but also bringing home some really nice mementos as well of your trip.
Yes.
And from the learning aspect, then they also your kids will also get to learn a little bit about Singapore's very vibrant culture. Then, of course, I would dedicate a couple of days to Sentosa, because that's a very easy family playground.
Yes.
Right, you can have a big day with all the attractions like your Universal Studios Singapore, your Singapore Oceanarium, the Skyline Luge, and then of course to recover from all of that, you're gonna need a flop and drop.
Yes. Yep. You need,
Right.
you need.
Yep, you need a flop and drop.
Absolutely.
And yeah, by the beach, and then of course, maybe dinner by the water. And then of course, another day for Mandai Wildlife Reserve. I would say, depending on the types of animals that you're interested in, the families can choose from the Singapore Zoo, Bird Paradise, River Wonders, Rainforest Wild Adventure, or Night Safari. And of course, earlier I had mentioned they have a new indoor attraction, Exploria. So these are great for kids, because there's that sense of play, learning, and wonder that they can get there. And that's a full day. And by day 6, I would definitely slow things down a little bit. Have a local family day at some of the spots that we had talked about earlier, whether it's East Coast Park, water play at the Children's Garden, just taking it easy, going to a hawker center, and then finish off strong with whatever you haven't had a chance to eat over the course of the trip.
Absolutely.
Tick off your bucket list of things that you haven't gotten to eat. And then, of course, spending some time at Jewel before flying home. Yeah, so I would say don't race through the checklist. Give every day a clear theme and allow yourself that flexibility. That way, you get a rich experience of Singapore, but still feeling like you're going home, having had a holiday. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, no worries.
Wellness travel doesn't have to mean escaping your kids. Before we wrap up today's episode, I wanted to leave you with a little thought around wellness travel, because I think it's becoming more accessible for families. For a long time, wellness holidays were marketed as quiet, adults-only resorts, spa treatments, robes, yoga retreats, and basically escaping your responsibilities. But honestly, That version of wellness travel doesn't fit family life at all. So after our intrepid trip in Bali, I went looking for it, because if you're going to be able to combine wellness travel with family travel, Bali seems like the logical place to start. We had a really magical stay in both Ubud and Nusa Dua at the Westin resorts, both hotels that really lean into wellness travel and family travel. You can read all about it on the website. The link is in the show notes. I learned that sometimes wellness is really just about slowing down. It might be trying a beginner yoga class together, even if your child spends half the class laughing while you attempt a very questionable headstand like I did. It might be walking through rice fields, eating slower meals, swimming together, spending less time on devices, or simply creating space to breathe. I think there's a mindset shift happening where family wellness travel becomes less about escaping your children and more about reconnecting with them, and I'm all for it. So that wraps up our chat about Singapore and why ease might actually be one of the most underrated parts of family travel. A huge thanks to Kim Spykerman from Singapore Tourism for joining me on the podcast today. And honestly, I think Singapore is one of those destinations that surprises people. It's not just a stopover city. It's a genuinely fantastic family destination in its own right. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe to the Family Holiday Destinations podcast wherever you listen. And if you'd like more destination guides, travel tips, and family travel inspiration, you can find everything over at the website at www.familyholidaydestinations.com. And until next time, happy travels and enjoy making those family memories.